Hello, it's Jason. Today I wanted to read a storybook over a picture book today. So I thought we could get nice and comfortable with a blanket and a pillow. We can listen to this story. Now sometimes in life, things are going to change and we're not really going to understand why. But if you try and find the good in it, something really great might be able to happen. This story is called The Wolf by Margaret Barbalet. The first time Tal heard the wolf, he didn't believe it. He went back to sleep. The next time, it woke all of them. But after a while, they fell asleep again. Next morning in the kitchen, however, things were not the same. Around the breakfast table, they began to discuss wolves. They don't live here, in this country, their mother said firmly. Where do they live? Di, the youngest, asked. Tal and Megan looked at each other. Mother didn't answer. Then it was time to go to school and they forgot about Di's question. That night, Tal heard the wolf again in their own garden. Next morning, before their mother was even awake, Tal got out the encyclopedia. We live in open, peaceful country. We always have. Megan was close to tears. They can't come here. Together they looked at the coloured pictures, but Tal shut the book. They knew Di must never see it. That night, Tal was unable to go to sleep. He thought of the hill that sheltered their house, the tree and rocks they had always played amongst. They knew every tree and every rock. They always walked to school. Their friends came over to play. As he went to sleep, Tal thought, I think of it always as sunlit, peaceful. I know it rains, but I think of it as sunlit and peaceful. He awoke to the whole house shaking as their mother ran downstairs to lock the windows. The howling went on and on. He knew it was the wolf coming closer. It was worse than what he could have imagined. It was worse than his dreams. The next day, without even mentioning wolves, their mother outlined some new rules. They would always have to play inside. The doors would have to be bolted and barred. Their mother looked at Tal. He was sometimes careless. What about school? Di asked. Their mother frowned. I'll have to take you in the car. Every day? Megan asked, then stopped. Of course it'll be every day. I wasn't thinking. That night, their mother went around the house, bolting shut all the windows. Some of them had never been bolted before, and stuck. She had to force and wedge them shut. It took a long time and it was dark by the time she had finished. I'm covered in lumps, announced Di at breakfast. He pulled up his pajama jacket. His chest and tummy looked like an archipelago. They weren't there yesterday, Mother decided. Let's see if they go by tomorrow. She packed the bag to take out to the car. In the new routine, they all followed her and jumped in as she slammed shut the front door. I just wish she'd say something. Anything. Tal thought as they drove off to school. She didn't talk about the wolf. She had just changed everything. Next day, Di's lumps had grown together to form islands. They might be something he ate, Mother pretended, rubbing in the cream they used for mosquito bites. It might be the wolf, Tal thought silently. Just the idea of it. That night, Tal awoke, aware that Di had been crying for some time. Megan stood helplessly by his bed. Mother came downstairs from her bedroom. What's the matter? Have you had a dream? No. I'm crying because the wolf's come. Because it used to be safe and now it's not. Tal heard his mother kiss Di and tuck him in her own bed. Later, he heard crying again. In secret, at school, Tal read all about families who had lived surrounded by wolves. He looked at the snow and tundra where the wolves prowled. At home, their garden was turning into a wilderness. At night, now, they ate dinner, trying to talk of other things, to argue the way they used to before the wolf came. Mother often turned on the radio so that there would be something cheerful in the background. After a few weeks, Tal noticed that she always hummed the same tune. A new one that went down and down. In bed, he would hear the howling coming closer and closer, leaping over the garden wall. Then he would hear the wolf prowling outside the house, testing every doorknob, pressing every window latch. Some nights he lay rigid with fear so that he could turn on his bedside light. He would fall asleep with it on. In the kitchen one weekend, when Megan and Di were watching television, Tal asked about his cat. "What if I left it out?" His mother turned, horrified, her hands covered in flour. "I mean, would that satisfy the wolf? Would it go away?" "Oh, love," she said, hugging him. "Of course it wouldn't." "What if I went out?" he said, beginning to cry. "It would be worth it for Megan and Di. Di's little." She hugged him again. "Tal, I know what you mean, but you can't make it go away. Can anyone?" No. Megan had been the loudest girl he had ever known, but now she was so busy she didn't have time to shout. "I want to make it like before the wolf came. I think about that every day," she said, brushing her teeth that night. "But you can't," Tal said kindly. "Well, I will," she shouted and rushed into her room. Later, through the wall, he heard her beginning to hum. It was the same final tune that his mother always sang. Months passed. They stopped talking about the wolf. It came every night and they were no longer shocked. Tal had his birthday and asked for a few friends. He played his records very loud, and after they had all left, he realized that no one had even mentioned the wolf. "You know, I don't think it's as loud as it used to be anymore," he said. "And from the front, this just looks like a normal house." His mother turned and looked at him startled, then interested. That night, he sat in his room surrounded by all his new presents. There was more than usual. He guessed to make up for the wolf. He thought of the time before the wolf came and saw it as a distant, green and sunlit memory. His family in a dream that he could never go back to. It was like being younger, he thought. That too was dear to him, and yet he couldn't ever have it back again. In the flames of the candles on his birthday cake he had seen. Unable to go back, ever, to the last year. A week after his birthday, when they were washing up, his mother said out of a long silence, "You know, I think you're right. It's definitely a lot softer than it used to be, but still close," he began. "You know, Mum, there's a boy at school whose family lived surrounded by wolves for a whole year. What did they do? Same as us. Boarded up the windows, stayed inside all the time. And now? It was a different country, Mum. Not here." Tal noticed next that while the wolf still prowled every night, it often whined and growled instead of howling. Once Tal went to the window at night, in the silence between its howls. He could hear it outside, scratching and panting. He imagined its tongue bobbing on an open jaw among the row of teeth. He put his face up on the boards one night, but all he could see was a crack of night sky. Half a year had passed. Megan had her birthday. Di adapted to life inside, inventing new games for them all on the stairs. Tal supposed they might never go outside in the garden again. Then, towards the end of the year, his mother put down her papers as he came in to say goodnight. It was something from work as usual. "I'd like you not to tell the others this, Tal, but I've seen the wolf. I took down a board from the window high up." As Tal stared at her, she said, "He's not as big as I thought." A week later, Tal had a dream. A voice came out of the night. He couldn't tell from where, and the voice spoke and said one thing over and over again. "Let it in. Let it in." Only when he woke, he realized that the voice was his own. Tal crept downstairs before it was light to bake Mum's birthday cake the morning of her birthday. He always did this. When the cake was in the oven, he made himself some breakfast. Suddenly he heard rasping. Something was snoring right outside the kitchen door. Suddenly he had to see. He went and found a strong kitchen knife and levered off one end of a board. It cracked as he took it away. Sunlight flooded his face, as startling as the sight of the wolf, awakened by the sound, bounding away in fright over the garden wall. When his mother saw the missing board, she smiled. Tal was so relieved that he found himself telling her about his dream and the voice saying, "Let it in, let it in." "I've had the same dream lately," she said. That night he had the dream again. He awoke in the dark, still hearing the voice. In his pajamas, he went down the stairs. He could hear the wolf outside the door, whining. Suddenly he realized that it was almost morning, half light. He wanted more than anything to go outside. Let it in, said the voice at his elbow. With a reckless movement, he took down the bar, cobwebbed and dirty, and opened the lock on the door. Then he pulled open the door wide and stood back. There stood the wolf, dirty and thin. Its hair was matted and grey. It looked at him and then limped past into the living room and lay down in front of the dying fire's warmth. It left muddy footprints and its tail knocked down the magazine. Outside, the garden waited, green and wonderful, just touched with the colour of sunrise. Tal went and woke the others and led them, holding Di's hand, down to the living room. "I've let the wolf in," he said, proudly, smiled, and said, "I think it might become our dog." That's the end of the story. See, sometimes change happens, and it can be a bit scary, but you just have to go with it, and something really great can happen. Hope you have a lovely afternoon. See you later. Bye.